My name is Paige Turner, 29, a marketing specialist in Colorado Springs. I lived in my parents' guest house, saving for my own place while paying $1,500 a month for their mortgage. It was our deal until my younger brother showed up buried in debt from blowing cash on parties and bad bets. Suddenly, I was expected to bail him out to keep the family afloat while he kept spending. I said no, but my parents pushed hard, preaching, "We're all in this together." One night, tensions exploded. Dad's face turned red, and he screamed, "Get out, and never come back." My heart pounded as I realized I was done. So I left, packed my bags, and walked away. Weeks later, Mom called frantic, asking why I'd stopped paying the mortgage. My answer shut them down. Curious what I said? Stick with me. This gets wild. Drop a comment with where you're watching. Hit like and subscribe to see this family drama unfold. Life was steady until Noah, my brother, showed up with a duffel bag and a string of excuses. I'd been living in my parents' guest house in Colorado Springs, pouring everything into my marketing job at a local ad agency. My days revolved around crafting pitches, chasing client approvals, and managing a high-stakes campaign for a regional chain. Every spare dollar went toward my dream of owning a home. But I was also covering $1,500 a month for Mom and Dad's mortgage, a deal we'd struck so I could stay rent-free. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me on track. I'd stay late at the office tweaking ad copy or crunching numbers, always with my savings goal in sight. My routine was tight work, save, repeat. I even cut back on coffee runs to stretch my budget further. Then my brother crashed back into our lives. He'd lost his bartending job in Denver, and instead of figuring it out, he showed up at our doorstep, reeking of cheap cologne and carrying a debt I could barely fathom. He'd blown thousands on designer clothes, late-night gambling apps, and rounds of drinks for strangers. I caught him bragging about a leather jacket he'd bought for $800 while I was scraping by to cover the mortgage. He didn't apologize, just grinned and said he'd sort it out soon. I wanted to believe him, but his track record screamed otherwise. I'd seen him pull this before back when he was 19, borrowing cash from Mom and Dad Gary Turner and Cheryl Turner for emergencies that always turned out to be concert tickets or bar tabs. I brought it up at dinner one night trying to keep my voice calm. "He needs to get a job," I said, cutting into my chicken. "We can't keep bankrolling his mistakes." Mom's face tightened and she set down her fork. "He's going through a rough patch," she said. "We're all in this together." Dad nodded, his jaw set like I was the one being unreasonable. They'd always had a soft spot for my brother, their baby boy, who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one, the one who paid bills on time, so naturally, I was expected to pick up the slack. They didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. I should dip into my savings to help him. The idea made my stomach churn. I'd worked too hard to let my dreams slip away for his bad choices. But the pressure didn't stop. Mom started dropping hints, daily little comments about how family comes first, how my brother just needed a little support to get back on his feet. Dad was less subtle. "You're doing well at your job," he'd say, like my paycheck was a family ATM. I tried to reason with them, explaining that my savings were for my future, not his debts. But every conversation ended the same way, them defending him, me biting my tongue to keep the peace. Work started to feel heavier, too. The campaign I was leading had a tight deadline, and I was already stretched thin. One afternoon, I flubbed a client call mixing up budget numbers because I was distracted replaying Mom's latest guilt trip in my head. My boss noticed, pulling me aside to ask if I was okay. I forced a smile, said everything was fine, but it wasn't. I'd catch myself staring at spreadsheets, calculating how much longer I could keep paying the mortgage while my brother drained us dry. My savings account, once growing steadily, was now stalled. Every time I checked my balance, I felt a pang of resentment. I tried talking to my brother directly, hoping he'd see reason. One evening, I found him sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You need to stop spending," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm not covering for you." He barely looked up, muttering something about a new job he'd probably get. I pressed harder, asking about his debt, how much to who, and he'd pay it back. He shrugged, said it was under control, then changed the subject to some party he'd been to. I walked away, my hands shaking, knowing he had no plan. The guest house, once my quiet retreat, started feeling like a cage. I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the heater, wondering how I'd ended up as the family's safety net. Mom and Dad's words echoed in my mind. We're all in this together. But it didn't feel like we. It felt like me against his chaos with them cheering him on. I kept up my routine work, save, pay the mortgage, but the weight of their expectations was crushing me. Something had to give. A week after my failed talk with my brother, I found a credit card statement that wasn't mine. It came in the mail tucked among bills for the guest house addressed to me, but with a bank I'd never used. My hands shook as I opened it. $5,000 in charges bars online gaming sites, a car rental I'd never touched. The account was opened in my name, my social security number, but I hadn't applied for it. My stomach dropped. I knew who had. My brother's reckless spending had just blown up in my face, and now my credit, my future was on the line. I stormed into the main house. The statement crumpled in my fist. He was in the kitchen microwaving leftovers, acting like the world was his playground. You used my name? I said, my voice low but sharp, holding up the paper. You opened a credit card and ran up $5,000. Are you insane? He froze, then shrugged, leaning against the counter. It's not a big deal, he said, smirking. I needed some cash flow. I'll handle it. His casual tone lit a fire in me. Handle it, I snapped. You're ruining my credit. This is fraud. He rolled his eyes like I was overreacting and mumbled. You've got money. Just pay it off for now. I couldn't believe it. He wasn't just dodging responsibility. He was blaming me for his mess. I didn't back down. You're fixing this, I said, stepping closer. Call the bank. Admit what you did or I will. His smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. You're so selfish, he shot back. Always acting like you're better than me. The accusation stung, but I held my ground. This isn't about me, I said. You crossed a line. Fix it or I'm reporting you. He grabbed his plate and walked out, muttering under his breath. I stood there, heart pounding, the weight of his betrayal sinking in. My name, my identity tangled in his chaos. It was worse than I'd imagined. That night, I called the bank, my voice steady, despite the panic in my chest. The rep confirmed the account was opened 3 weeks ago, tied to my personal info. I explained it wasn't me, and they flagged it for fraud, advising me to freeze my credit. I spent hours online locking my accounts with Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. Every step a reminder of how deep my brother's recklessness ran. It wasn't just money anymore. It was my future at stake. If my credit tanked, my dream of buying a house, already stretched thin by the $1,500 I paid monthly for Mom and Dad's mortgage, could vanish entirely. I brought it up with Mom and Dad the next day, hoping they'd see the severity. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. I laid out the statement, explained the fraud, the $5,000. He used my identity. I said, my voice calm but firm. This could ruin me. You need to make him stop. Mom's face crumpled, her hands twisting in her lap. He didn't mean it, she said softly. He's just in a tight spot. I stared, incredulous. Dad leaned forward, his jaw tight. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, he said. Pay it off, and we'll deal with him later. I felt like I'd been punched. They weren't just defending him. They were dismissing the fact that he'd stolen from me, put my financial life at risk. You're not listening, I said, my voice rising. This isn't just about money. He committed a crime. Mom shook her head, tears welling. Don't say that about your brother, she whispered. Dad's eyes narrowed. You've got a good job, he said. You can handle this. Stop stirring up trouble. The unfairness burned. I was the one paying their mortgage, keeping the family afloat, and now I was the villain for calling out his actions. I left the room, my hands shaking, the statement still clutched in my fist. They'd chosen him again. Work offered a brief escape, but even that was slipping. My boss had just handed me a huge opportunity, leading a new ad campaign for a national client, a chance to prove myself for a senior strategist role. The pitch was due in 10 days, and I was already behind my focus, shredded by the mess at home. I'd stay late at the office staring at mock-ups, but my mind kept drifting to that credit card statement, mom's excuses, dad's dismissal. During a team meeting, I fumbled a question about budget projections. My thoughts tangled in the fraud report I'd filed. My boss raised an eyebrow and I forced a smile, promising to follow up. I couldn't let this ruin my shot. Back at the guest house, I paced the walls, closing in. My brother's stunt wasn't just a betrayal. It was a wake-up call. I couldn't keep living under their roof, their rules, their blind loyalty to him. The guest house, once a practical step toward my future, now felt like a trap. I'd protected my credit for now, but how long until he pulled something else? Mom and Dad's refusal to hold him accountable was a warning. They'd keep expecting me to fix his messes, to sacrifice my goals for his mistakes. The thought of letting this cycle continue made my skin crawl. I needed a way out, even if it meant starting over. Days after the credit card fiasco, Dad called a family meeting that changed everything. I walked into the living room, my stomach tight, sensing a storm brewing. Mom sat on the couch, her hands fidgeting, while my brother sprawled in an armchair scrolling through his phone like nothing mattered. Dad stood by the window, his face hard, the Colorado Springs desk casting shadows behind him. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Your brother's debts are out of control again. $10,000 from gambling apps and shopping sprees. You're covering it, Paige, or you're out of the guest house." The words hit like a freight train. $10,000. On top of the mess he'd already made with my credit. My head spun, but I kept my face steady. "I'm not paying for his mistakes," I said, my voice firm, though my hands shook at my sides. "I've already done enough for this family." My brother didn't look up his thumb, still swiping across his screen. Mom's voice broke the silence, soft and pleading. "He's trying, Paige," she said. "He just needs a little help to get back on track." Family sacrifices for family. Her words stung, twisting the knife of their favoritism. Sacrifices, I shot back, my tone sharper than I meant. "I've been sacrificing for years, keeping this house afloat. When does he step up?" Dad's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "You've got a good job," he said. "You can afford it. Stop making this harder than it needs to be." The unfairness burned through me. I turned to my brother, who finally glanced up, his expression bored. "You're drowning us," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You blew 10 grand on nonsense, and I'm supposed to fix it. Explain yourself." He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "It's not my fault things got tight," he said, his voice dripping with indifference. "You're always so high and mighty, acting like you're perfect." His words were a slap, but I didn't flinch. "This isn't about me," I snapped. "You crossed a line, and I'm not cleaning up your mess again." He rolled his eyes and went back to his phone, dismissing me entirely. I turned to Dad, hoping for a shred of reason. "He's not even trying," I said. "Why am I the one who has to pay?" Dad stepped forward, his voice rising. "Because you're part of this family," he shouted. "Either you help or you leave and don't come back." The room went quiet, his words hanging heavy. Mom gasped, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away. My heart pounded, a mix of shock and betrayal washing over me. I'd expected resistance, but not this, an ultimatum to throw away my future or lose my home. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the raw sting of their choice. They were picking him again over me. Mom tried to soften it, her voice shaky. "Paige, please," she said. "We just need to stick together. He'll figure it out." I shook my head, my throat tight. "You keep enabling him," I said. "You're letting him ruin us, and I'm the one paying the price." I looked at my brother, still glued to his phone, unbothered by the chaos he'd caused. "You don't even care," I said, my voice breaking. He didn't respond, didn't even look up. I turned and walked out, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The guest house felt colder when I got back, the walls closing in. Their demand, $10,000 for his recklessness, was a weight I couldn't carry anymore. I sat on my bed, my mind racing. My contributions to the house, my years of keeping things together, meant nothing to them. They saw me as a resource, not a daughter. My brother's debts, his indifference, their blind defense. It was a cycle I couldn't break while living under their roof. The guest house, once a practical haven, was now a trap, tying me to their chaos. I thought about my job. The new ad campaign I was leading the chance at a promotion. If I stayed, I'd lose more than money. I'd lose myself. I grabbed my phone and called Lindsay Wade, my best friend since college. Her voice cut through the fog in my head, warm and steady. "Paige, what's going on?" she asked. I spilled it all. Dad's ultimatum, the $10,000, my brother's apathy, Mom's excuses. My voice cracked as I admitted how it felt like my family had turned their backs on me. "They're choosing him over me." I said the words bitter. Lindsay didn't hesitate. "You don't deserve this," she said. "You need to get out, Paige. For good." Her words hit hard, echoing the thoughts I'd been pushing down. Staying meant more of this, more demands, more betrayal, more of my dreams slipping away. I took a deep breath, staring at the guest house walls. Leaving would cost me rent, moving a hit to my savings, but staying would cost more, my sanity, my future, my peace. "Can we talk tomorrow?" I asked Lindsay, my voice steadier now. "I need to figure out how to leave." She replied instantly, her tone firm. "Anytime. I've got your back." For the first time that night, I felt a spark of hope. The guest house wasn't home anymore. It was a chain, and I was ready to break it. Dad's ultimatum had drawn a line, but I was the one who'd decide where to stand. The next morning, I sat with Lindsay at a local coffee shop, mapping out my escape. The place buzzed with chatter, but I barely noticed my mind stuck on Dad's ultimatum. I poured out the whole mess to Lindsay, his demand to pay $10,000 for my brother's debts, his final scream to get out. My voice wavered as I admitted how it felt like my family had turned their backs on me. Lindsay leaned forward, her eyes steady. "You can't stay," she said. "They're using you. Come live with me in my downtown apartment. It's small, but there's space for you." Her offer hit like a lifeline. I hadn't even considered moving in with her, but the idea sparked something freedom from the chaos at home. I sipped my coffee, running numbers in my head. Renting with Lindsay would cost about $000 a month, half my current mortgage contribution. I'd still be paying $1,500 to Mom and Dad until I could cut ties completely. My savings built for a house down payment would take a hit. I'd been so close, maybe a year away from buying a place. Leaving now meant pushing that dream back maybe 2 years, maybe more. But staying meant more fights, more demands, more of my brother's recklessness draining me. I looked at Lindsay, her face full of concern. "It's worth it," I said, my voice firm. "I need to get out." Back at the office, I grabbed lunch with Colin Hayes, a colleague who'd become a sounding board over the years. I told him about the blowout, how Dad had thrown me out over my brother's debts. Colin sat down his sandwich, his brow furrowed. "You're killing it at work," he said. "You've got a shot at that senior strategist role. Don't let them drag you down." His words sank in. My career was the one thing I could control, the one place I wasn't failing. "You're right," I said. "I need to focus on me for once." Colin nodded, his voice calm but sure. "Leaving's the right call. You've got this." That conversation sealed it. I spent the next few days moving in secret, careful not to tip off Mom, Dad, or my brother. I scoured online listings for apartments, narrowing it down to Lindsay's place and a backup studio in case her roommate situation changed. Her apartment was a cozy 1-bedroom in central Colorado Springs, close to work with rent I could swing if I tightened my budget. I started packing my things in the guest house, moving slowly to avoid suspicion. Clothes went into duffel bags, books into boxes, all tucked into a corner of my closet. I labeled them storage so my brother wouldn't snoop. He'd been lounging around the main house, oblivious as ever, while Mom and Dad acted like nothing had happened. I called a local moving company, booking a small van for the end of the week. The guy on the phone quoted me $400 for a short trip across town. I winced thinking of my savings, but it was a small price for freedom. I kept up my routine to throw them off: breakfast with Mom, quick chats with Dad about work, even a forced smile for my brother. Inside, I was a mess, second-guessing every step. What if I couldn't afford rent? What if work didn't pan out? But every time I wavered, I remembered Dad's voice, sharp and final. "Get out." I wasn't staying where I wasn't wanted. Lindsay helped me plan over late-night texts. She sent me a lease agreement to review, Promise to clear out half her closet for my stuff. We'll make it fun, she wrote, adding a string of emojis. Her optimism kept me grounded. I also met with my bank to separate my finances from the family's joint account. The teller walked me through, closing my access, ensuring my brother couldn't touch another cent. It felt like cutting a chain. By Friday, I had everything in place: a new address, a moving date, a budget. I'd move in with Lindsay, split rent, and rebuild from there. The guest house, once my safe haven, now felt like a weight I was ready to shed. I was scared, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking back control. Saturday came, and the house was quiet as my family left for a cousin's wedding. I stood in the guest house, my heart racing but steady, knowing this was my chance. Lindsay pulled up in her beat-up hatchback, and Colin arrived minutes later in a rented moving van, the engine rumbling in the driveway. We had a narrow window. Mom, Dad, and my brother wouldn't be back until evening. I'd planned every detail to make this quick and clean. Only the essentials were coming with me: clothes, a few books, my laptop, and a box of keepsakes. The rest, old furniture knickknacks, I left behind. It felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. Lindsay hugged me as she walked in, her voice bright but firm. Let's do this, she said, grabbing a duffel bag. Colin, ever practical, started loading boxes into the van, his sleeves rolled up. You're doing the right thing, he said, stacking my laptop case carefully. Their support kept me grounded as we worked. We moved fast, carrying bags and boxes through the morning drizzle, the van filling up in under an hour. I kept glancing at the main house, half expecting my brother to show up and make a scene, but the place stayed silent. By noon, we were on our way to Lindsay's apartment in central Colorado Springs. The drive was short, just 15 minutes, but it felt like crossing a border. Her place was a cramped one-bedroom with mismatched furniture, but it was warm, alive with her energy. We hauled my stuff up the narrow stairwell, Colin joking about needing a gym membership after this. Lindsay cleared space in her closet, shoving her clothes to one side. Plenty of room, she said, grinning. By 3 o'clock, everything was unpacked. My clothes hung, books stacked on a borrowed shelf, laptop plugged in on the kitchen counter. It wasn't much, but it was mine, free from the weight of family demands. Back at the guest house for one final trip, I stood alone in the empty space. The bare walls stared back, and for a moment, I felt a pang of loss. Not for the place, but for what I'd hoped it could be. I shook it off and sat at the small desk, pulling out a sheet of paper. My hand trembled as I wrote the letter. Mom and Dad, I began. I'm gone. I've been paying $1,500 a month for your mortgage, but you told me to get out. I'm not responsible for this family anymore, especially not for my brother's debts. I'm done. I kept it short, each word deliberate. No room for misinterpretation. I folded the paper, left it on the desk, and locked the door behind me. It felt final, like closing a chapter. Driving away, I felt a rush of relief, like a knot in my chest had loosened. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Lindsay's apartment wasn't my dream home, but it was a fresh start, a place where I answered only to myself. I pictured my savings account no longer bleeding for someone else's mistakes. The thought of my brother's carelessness, Mom and Dad's blind support, it still stung, but it was behind me now. I glanced at the rearview mirror, the guest house shrinking in the distance, and let out a shaky laugh. I'd done it. I was free. But as the high faded, a flicker of worry crept in. What would happen when they got back? Mom would probably cry. Dad would fume. And my brother, he'd probably shrug it off like always. I could already hear Dad's voice accusing me of abandoning them, or Mom pleading for me to come back. The letter was clear, but would they even read it? Would they care? I pushed the thoughts down, focusing on the road ahead. Lindsay and Colin were waiting at the apartment, ready to crack open a pizza and celebrate. Their laughter would drown out the doubts, at least for tonight. I pulled into the parking lot, the van's engine ticking as it cooled. Lindsay waved from the balcony, her smile wide. Colin was already inside, setting up a folding chair for me. This was my new normal, not perfect, but mine. The letter lingered in my mind, its words a line in the sand. I'd meant every one of them. My family had made their choice, and now I'd made mine. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it belonged to me. 3 weeks later, Mom's desperate texts lit up my phone. "Paige, we're in trouble." The first one read, "The bank's threatening to foreclose. Please call." I stared at the screen, my coffee cooling on the kitchen counter of Lindsay's apartment. They had found my letter, realized I'd stopped paying the $800 a month toward their mortgage. A bank notice had arrived warning of foreclosure if they missed another payment. 30 days, it said, before they'd lose the house. My stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with a strange mix of pity and resolve. I'd carried them for too long. Mom called that evening, her voice trembling. "Paige, we need you," she said. "Just pay the mortgage a little longer. We'll figure it out." I took a deep breath, standing by the window of my new home. The city lights of Colorado Springs flickering below. "You told me to get out," I said, my tone even but firm. "I'm not responsible for your choices or his." She pleaded, her words tumbling over each other. "Your brother's trying, but he needs time." I cut her off. "I'm done cleaning up his messes. You made your choice." I hung up, my heart pounding, but lighter. I'd drawn a line, and I wasn't crossing it. Word got back to me through a cousin. My brother hadn't changed. He was still dodging jobs, racking up credit card bills, leaving Mom and Dad to scramble. Their finances were crumbling. Late notices piled up, not just for the mortgage, but for utilities, car payments, even his old gambling debts. The $10,000 Dad had demanded I cover was just the start. My brother's recklessness had pushed them deeper into the red. The cousin said the bank was serious about foreclosure. Their house now a ticking clock. I felt a pang, imagining Mom's worry, Dad's anger, but I pushed it down. They'd enabled him, and now they were paying the price. At home, things were worse. Mom and Dad were at each other's throats, something they'd rarely done before. The cousin described heated arguments. Dad blaming Mom for coddling my brother, Mom accusing Dad of pushing me away. They couldn't agree on how to handle him. Dad wanted to cut him off, force him to fend for himself. Mom insisted on giving him one more chance. Their fights echoed through the house. A crack in the foundation of the family they'd always claimed was unbreakable. My brother, oblivious as ever, kept spending, kept promising he'd fix it soon. He hadn't, and they were sinking. Meanwhile, I was building something new. Lindsay's apartment had become my sanctuary. The cramped space with its creaky floors and mismatched dishes felt more like home than the guest house ever had. At work, I'd thrown myself into the big ad campaign I'd been managing. Late nights, endless revisions, and a pitch meeting that had my palms sweating paid off. The client loved it, and my boss called me into her office a week later. "You're our new senior strategist," she said, a rare smile breaking through. The promotion came with a raise enough to rebuild my savings, even with rent. I walked out of her office, my chest swelling with pride. For the first time, I was moving forward, not just holding on. I hadn't spoken to Mom, Dad, or my brother since the call. I'd blocked their numbers, not out of spite, but necessity. Every text, every plea had felt like a hook, trying to pull me back into their chaos. I checked in with Lindsay, who reminded me I'd done the right thing. "You're thriving," she said one night over takeout. "Don't let them drag you down." Colin echoed her at work, tossing me a high five when he heard about the promotion. Their support anchored me, a reminder that I didn't need my family's approval to be whole. Looking back, I saw the lesson clearly. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was survival. My family had manipulated me, guilt me into carrying their burdens. But I'd broken free. Their choices, coddling my brother, ignoring my sacrifices, had consequences. The threat of losing their house, the fights tearing them apart. Those were their burdens now, not mine. I felt stronger, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen myself. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built on my terms. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you for sticking with me. It's not easy to walk away from family, to draw that line, but sometimes it's the only way to protect your peace. What would you have done in my shoes? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them.